One of the greatest guitar legends of all time recently opened up about a heartbreaking health diagnosis that's impacting his music and life. How is he coping with this unexpected challenge, and what does it mean for his future? Join us as we explore the emotional story behind Eric Clapton's diagnosis and what lies ahead for this iconic artist, a child of secrets and lies. Eric Clapton was born into a world already full of confusion and heartbreak. His life began on March 30th, 1945, in the small town of Ripley, Surrey, England. The world was still at war. His father, Edward Walter Fryer, was a Canadian soldier stationed in England during World War II. He met Clapton's mother, Patricia "Molly" Clapton, who was just 16 at the time. It was a brief relationship. Before Eric was even born, Edward returned to Canada, leaving Patricia behind. He would never meet his son. Patricia, being so young and unable to raise a child on her own, made a difficult decision. She handed baby Eric over to her parents, Rose and Jack Clapton. They took him in and raised him as their own son. To make things easier, or perhaps less painful, Patricia was introduced to Eric as his older sister. From the beginning, Eric's life was built on a lie, even though it was done out of care and protection. Growing up in his grandparents' home, Eric had no reason to question the truth. He called them Mom and Dad. He believed Patricia was simply his much older sister. Then one day, when Eric was 9 years old, everything changed. He overheard a family conversation that wasn't meant for his ears. It was during that moment that he learned the truth. Patricia was not his sister. She was actually his mother. And the man he had never met, Edward Fryer, was his real father. The revelation was shocking. It hit Eric like a wave of confusion and pain. For a young boy, this was a lot to carry. He felt betrayed and alone. It was as if his whole world had been built on a secret. He began to withdraw from those around him. He became quiet, distant, and emotionally shut off. In these early years, Eric started to search for something, anything that could help him feel whole again. That's when he found music. More specifically, he found the blues. He first heard the haunting sounds of blues through old records and radio shows. Artists like Muddy Waters, Big Bill Brunsey, and Robert Johnson spoke to him in a way that no one else could. These were not happy songs. They were songs filled with sadness, struggle, and pain. Emotions Eric knew all too well. The blues didn't just sound good to him, they felt like a mirror of his own heart. Eric became obsessed with this music. He didn't just listen to it, he lived it. He would spend hours listening to records, trying to understand every note and every lyric. The raw emotion in those songs helped him make sense of his own feelings. When he picked up his first guitar at age 13, he began to teach himself how to play by mimicking the blues legends he admired. By the time Eric turned 13, his life had already been shaped by secrets and emotional pain. But something was about to change. That year, he received a birthday gift that would change everything, a guitar. It wasn't fancy. It was an acoustic holler, a German-made instrument that cost around £2. But to Eric, it became the most important thing in the world. He began practicing every day. He would spend hours locked in his room, trying to copy the sounds he heard on his favorite blues records. He listened to musicians like Robert Johnson, B.B. King, and Muddy Waters. He slowed their songs down and studied every note. He didn't have a teacher. He learned by ear, teaching himself one step at a time. By the time he was a teenager, people around him were starting to notice his talent. His skills on the guitar were improving fast. While other kids were going out to play or doing normal teenage things, Eric was in his room playing the blues. After finishing school, he decided to attend Kingston College of Art in 1961. He enrolled with the idea of studying painting. At the time, art school was one of the few places that accepted creative kids who didn't fit into regular education. Eric was interested in visual art, but deep down his passion was still with music. It didn't take long for him to lose interest in art classes. He skipped lectures and barely participated. Instead, he spent more time playing his guitar and listening to records. His teachers were not impressed. After just 1 year, he was expelled. Officially, it was for lack of progress and poor attendance. This might have been a low point for some, but for Eric, it was actually a turning point. Being expelled forced him to face a big decision. What was he really going to do with his life? He chose music. After leaving art school, Clapton started looking for ways to play in front of people. He began joining local bands. One of the first groups he played with was the Roosters, a rhythm and blues band. He played with them from January to August 1963. It wasn't glamorous. They performed in small venues and local clubs, but for Eric, it was a chance to get experience. He learned how to play live, how to work with other musicians, and how to adjust his playing based on the crowd. After the Roosters, he joined Casey Jones and the Engineers for a short time. Again, the gigs were small and the pay was low, but Clapton didn't care about money or fame. He was completely focused on getting better and finding his own style. These early bands gave him valuable experience. He learned about band dynamics, how to cooperate, how to lead, and when to step back. He also started to understand what made his playing different and special. During this time, people began to talk about Eric Clapton in the local music scene. His technical skill, especially at such a young age, was rare. Other musicians noticed how seriously he took the blues, even when it wasn't a popular genre. He wasn't playing for fun. He was playing because he felt it in his soul. By the end of 1963, Clapton was ready for something bigger. He had proven himself in small clubs. He had learned the ropes in local bands. Now he wanted to take his talent to the next level. And that's when the right opportunity came knocking, and it would change everything. Fame and inner conflict. By the early 1960s, Eric Clapton's name was spreading through the music world. Word had gotten around. There was a young guitarist who could play the blues with a rare mix of skill and emotion. In 1963, this growing reputation led him to join a band that was starting to make waves. The Yardbirds. The Yardbirds were a rhythm and blues group with a raw sound. When Clapton joined, they were focused on blues-based music, which suited him perfectly. He brought energy and technical brilliance to the band, and his performances quickly gained attention. Audiences were amazed by his guitar solos, and other musicians admired his serious dedication to the blues. But as time went on, the music scene began to change. Record labels wanted hits. The Yardbirds started moving toward a more commercial, pop-friendly sound. This didn't sit well with Clapton. He believed deeply in the blues. To him, music wasn't just about selling records. It was about staying true to the roots of the sound he loved. When the Yardbirds released For Your Love in 1965, Clapton knew it was time to go. The song was a hit, but it wasn't blues. It was pop, and he couldn't stand behind it. So even though the band was growing in popularity, Clapton made a difficult decision. He left the group. He walked away from a rising career because he didn't want to compromise his values. That moment showed the kind of artist he was, someone who chose integrity over fame. Not long after leaving the Yardbirds, Clapton found himself in a new and exciting project. In 1966, he teamed up with bassist Jack Bruce and drummer Ginger Baker to form a new band called Cream. This group was unlike anything else at the time. It brought together three extremely talented musicians, each with a unique style. Together, they created a powerful experimental mix of blues, rock, and psychedelic sounds. Cream was a major success. Their songs, like Sunshine of Your Love, White Room, and Crossroads, became hits. Clapton's guitar playing reached new levels. He was now seen not just as a great guitarist, but as one of the best in the world. But behind the scenes, things were tense. Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker had a rocky relationship. They often argued, and their personal differences made working together difficult. Clapton, caught in the middle, grew tired of the constant fighting. By 1968, just 2 years after it began, Cream broke up. They were hugely successful, but the pressure and personal tensions made it impossible to continue. Once again, Clapton was left searching for something more meaningful. In 1969, Clapton tried again. He joined forces with Steve Winwood, a talented singer and keyboard player from the band Traffic. Together, they formed Blind Faith. This group was considered a supergroup because it featured famous, experienced musicians. Fans had high expectations. Blind Faith released one self-titled album and went on tour. But even with all the attention, Clapton wasn't happy. He felt that the band was rushed into the spotlight before they had time to grow. The music felt unfinished, and the connection between the members wasn't strong enough. He was also uncomfortable with the fame and hype surrounding the group. In the end, Blind Faith didn't last long. They broke up within the same year. This short-lived project reflected something deeper about Clapton. Time and time again he reached the top. Critical acclaim, sold-out concerts, and big sales, but he still didn't feel fulfilled. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing something inside himself, something more honest and real. And just when things looked uncertain again, a new friendship would lead him down a very different road. Love, betrayal, and collapse. One of the most painful chapters in his story began with a love triangle involving his close friend George Harrison, the famous guitarist from the Beatles, and Pattie Boyd, George's wife. Pattie was a beautiful model, full of charm and spirit. Clapton met her through Harrison, and over time, he found himself falling deeply in love with her. The problem was, she was married to one of his best friends. Clapton tried to fight these feelings, but they only grew stronger. He kept his emotions hidden, but inside he was struggling. He felt helpless, stuck between love and loyalty. Eventually, all of those feelings came pouring out in the form of music. Clapton turned his emotional pain into something powerful, Layla. The song was the centerpiece of the album Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs, released in 1970 by his new band, Derek and the Dominoes. Layla was raw and honest. It told the story of a man who was madly in love with a woman he couldn't have. The music was filled with passion, from the desperate lyrics to the wild guitar solos. It was Clapton's way of expressing everything he had kept inside. Even though the album didn't sell very well at first, it later became one of the greatest rock albums of all time. Layla became a classic, praised for its emotion and intensity. But for Clapton, it wasn't just a hit song. It was a cry for help, a sign of a man who was heartbroken and starting to fall apart. At the same time, Clapton was also entering a dangerous new phase in his life. After Cream and Blind Faith, he wanted to create something more personal. That's how Derek and the Dominoes came together. It wasn't meant to be a superstar band. Clapton wanted to keep things low-key and focus on music, not fame. The group included Bobby Whitlock, Carl Rattle, and Jim Gordon. One of the most special parts of this band was the involvement of Duane Allman, the brilliant slide guitarist from the Allman Brothers Band. Clapton admired Allman's playing, and the two quickly formed a deep musical bond. Their guitar work on Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs was electric, filled with emotion and soul. Their chemistry helped make the album unforgettable, but this high point didn't last long. In 1971, just 1 year after the album's release, Duane Allman died in a motorcycle accident. He was only 24 years old. The loss hit Clapton hard. Allman had become more than a musical partner. He was a friend, someone Clapton respected deeply. After Duane's death, Clapton's world started to collapse. Already dealing with emotional pain from the situation with Pattie Boyd, he now felt even more alone. He began using heroin, and soon the addiction took over his life. Over the next 3 years, Clapton fell into a dark period of isolation. He disappeared from public life. He stopped performing. He rarely left his house. Most of his days were spent using drugs and trying to block out the pain. Friends and fans didn't know what was happening to him. Some thought he had quit music. Others worried he might not survive at all. During this time, Clapton became almost a ghost of himself. He stopped caring about everything: his health, his career, even his relationships. The man who had once been a vibrant and passionate performer was now silent and hidden away. It was one of the lowest points in his life. And just when things seemed like they couldn't get worse, a surprising invitation would help start his return to the spotlight. From addiction to alcohol. In the early 1970s, Clapton hadn't performed in nearly 3 years. He was weak, both mentally and physically. Most people didn't know if he would ever return to music or even survive. That's when Pete Townshend, the guitarist from The Who, and one of Clapton's close friends, decided to step in. Townshend believed that Clapton still had music left in him, and that a comeback could help him recover. So he organized a special event, the Rainbow Concert, held on January 13, 1973, at the Rainbow Theatre in London. The goal was simple: get Clapton on stage again, even just for one night. The show brought together a lineup of talented musicians, including Townshend himself, Steve Winwood, Ron Wood, and others. But the spotlight was clearly on Clapton. He was nervous, unsure, and still struggling with heroin withdrawal. He was far from the powerful guitarist fans once knew, but when he walked on stage, something changed. Clapton played with emotion, even though he was still frail. His hands were shaky, but his guitar still had a voice. The crowd welcomed him with love and excitement. It was a difficult performance, but it sparked something inside him. For the first time in years, he felt a reason to keep going. The Rainbow Concert didn't just bring Clapton back to the stage. It gave him hope that life and music were still possible. Even though Clapton had overcome heroin, he soon turned to another substance: alcohol. At first, drinking seemed harmless compared to heroin. It was legal and socially accepted, but for Clapton, it quickly became just as dangerous. By the late 1970s, alcohol began to take over his life. His drinking was heavy and constant. He became erratic, angry, and unpredictable, especially in his personal relationships. Though he was still releasing music and performing, his behavior was becoming more unstable. Clapton's personal life also suffered. He had finally married Pattie Boyd in 1979, years after the emotional roller coaster that had inspired Layla. But the marriage was not peaceful. Clapton's drinking caused constant arguments and emotional distance. The relationship, already complicated, began to fall apart. Things got worse in the early 1980s. Clapton was performing regularly, but his health was starting to fail. His body couldn't handle the amount of alcohol he was consuming. On stage in 1981, during a performance, he collapsed. The cause was alcohol-induced heart failure. It was a frightening moment, and for many, it was clear that Clapton's life was once again in serious danger. Despite the warning signs, Clapton didn't immediately stop drinking. He continued to battle with alcohol for several more years. It became another long fight, much like his earlier struggle with heroin. His music career stayed active, but behind the scenes, his personal life was falling apart again. Clapton's journey through addiction didn't end with heroin. It simply changed forms. Alcohol became the new demon in his life, and it would take more time, more help, and more pain before he would finally find a path to real recovery. But just when it seemed like his struggles might never end, a life-changing experience was waiting just around the corner. The death of his son. By the late 1980s, Eric Clapton had faced many ups and downs in his life. He had conquered heroin and was still fighting alcohol. His music career was stable, but his personal life remained complicated. Then, in the early 1990s, he experienced a loss so painful that it would change him forever. Clapton married Pattie Boyd in 1979 after years of chasing her, despite her being married to his friend George Harrison. Their marriage, however, was not a happy one. Clapton was struggling with alcohol, and the couple often fought. His infidelity added even more pain to the relationship. Over time, the love that had once seemed so strong began to fade. By 1988, they were officially divorced. Not long after, Clapton began a relationship with Italian model Lori Del Santo. In 1986, they had a son together named Connor. For Clapton, becoming a father felt like a second chance. He was excited to be involved in Connor's life and tried to spend as much time with him as possible, even though he wasn't living full-time with Del Santo and the boy. During this time, Clapton began to focus more on being sober and present. He saw Connor as a reason to live better. It looked like Clapton was finally on the path to healing, both personally and emotionally. But in just one moment, everything would come crashing down. On the morning of March 20th, 1991, Clapton's 4-year-old son Connor died in a terrible accident. The tragedy happened in New York City, where Connor was staying with his mother in a high-rise apartment. A cleaning lady had left a window open, something that should never have happened in a building like that. Connor, playing and running around like any child would, fell from the 53rd floor. Clapton was devastated. He had just spent the previous day with Connor, taking him to the circus and enjoying a rare, peaceful moment together. That joyful memory turned into unbearable grief when he received the news. His son, the person who had helped him find purpose, was gone in an instant. The pain of losing Connor was deeper than anything Clapton had ever felt before. He isolated himself from the world once again, falling into a deep period of mourning. But this time, he didn't turn to drugs or alcohol. Instead, he stayed sober and used music as a way to process his grief. Still, the emotional weight was crushing. Clapton later said that Connor's death forced him to take a hard look at his life. He knew he needed to stay clean and focused, even through the heartbreak, because he didn't want to destroy himself the way he nearly had in the past. He poured all of his pain into his music, hoping to find healing not just for himself, but also for anyone who had experienced loss. The result of this grief was the now famous song, Tears in Heaven. Clapton wrote it with songwriter Will Jennings as a direct tribute to Connor. It asked the heartbreaking question, "Would you know my name if I saw you in heaven?" The lyrics were deeply personal, raw, and honest. The song was first featured in the 1991 film Rush, but it quickly took on a life of its own. It was later included in Clapton's 1992 Unplugged album, which was recorded live for MTV. The stripped-down version of the song connected with millions of people around the world. Many could feel Clapton's sorrow through the words and the soft melody. Tears in Heaven became one of Clapton's most successful songs. It topped charts and earned 3 Grammy Awards in 1993, including Song of the Year, Record of the Year, and Best Male Pop Vocal Performance. But for Clapton, the song was never about awards or fame. It was about love, loss, and trying to understand how to go on after the unthinkable. For years, Clapton continued to perform Tears in Heaven at concerts, but eventually he stopped. In interviews, he explained that he no longer felt the need to play it. It had served its purpose, helping him grieve, helping others heal, and honoring his son. But as time passed, Clapton chose to keep that pain private. The song remains one of the most powerful tributes ever written for a lost child. This period of Clapton's life shaped everything that followed. The death of Connor was the most painful chapter in his story, but it also became a turning point. Clapton stayed sober, kept making music, and tried to live a more peaceful life. He found new ways to move forward, while always keeping Connor's memory close to his heart. A new love and family. After years of heartbreak, addiction, and emotional struggle, Eric Clapton finally found something he had never truly experienced before: peace. That peace began when he met Melia McHenry, a woman much younger than him, but grounded and kind. They met in 1998 at a party in Los Angeles. Melia was working as an event planner for Armani, and Clapton was attending as a guest. Despite the age difference, he was in his 50s and she was in her 20s. They quickly developed a strong connection. Melia was not part of the celebrity world. She wasn't a model or an actress. She lived a quieter life, and that calm, steady nature was exactly what Clapton needed. After years of dramatic relationships and the spotlight constantly on him, Melia's presence felt safe and comforting. The two began dating seriously, and by 2002, they were married. Together, they built something Clapton had always longed for: a real family. They had 3 daughters: Julie Rose, Ella May, and Sophie Bell. For the first time in his life, Clapton found himself fully present as a father. He no longer had to split his attention between his addictions and his music. Now his focus was on raising his daughters and being a good husband. He often said that Melia and the girls gave him a reason to live in the moment. Clapton also made the decision to step back from the chaos of constant touring and public attention. While he didn't completely retire from music, he slowed things down. He chose to spend more time at home, enjoying a quieter lifestyle. His days were no longer filled with late-night shows and parties. They were filled with school runs, family dinners, and time in the garden. He even admitted in interviews that being around his daughters helped him heal parts of himself that had been broken for decades. A heartbreaking diagnosis. As Eric Clapton grew older, he began to face serious challenges with his health. In 2016, he publicly revealed that he had been diagnosed with peripheral neuropathy. This condition affects the nerves, especially in the hands and feet. It can cause sharp pain, numbness, and weakness. For a guitarist, this is a devastating diagnosis. Clapton admitted that it was becoming harder and harder to play the guitar. His fingers no longer moved the way they once had. Every time he played, he felt discomfort or pain. Clapton also dealt with tinnitus, which is a constant ringing or buzzing in the ears. It's a common issue for musicians who've spent decades around loud music. Over time, the damage to his hearing added another layer of difficulty to performing. Clapton opened up about these struggles in interviews, explaining that the conditions were progressive. "It won't get better," he said honestly. He wanted fans to understand that while he still loved music, his body was no longer working the way it used to. Despite these challenges, Clapton did not completely step away from music. However, his health problems forced him to slow down. He began canceling concerts, especially when his nerve pain or bronchitis became too severe. One of the most publicized cancellations happened in 2017, when he had to pull out of shows in Los Angeles. At that time, his doctors said he had severe bronchitis, and he needed to rest. The cancellations disappointed fans, but most people understood. Clapton wasn't just dealing with temporary issues. These were long-term, painful conditions. Even with all this, Clapton made it clear that he had no plans to retire completely. In fact, he continued to make public appearances, release music, and perform at selected events. In 2018, he headlined the British Summertime Festival in London's Hyde Park, playing in front of tens of thousands of fans. His performance was emotional. People could see that he was not as fast or physically strong as before, but the heart and skill were still there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss what's coming next.